You know, Trump killed Medicaid, killed the whole system, hurt a lot of people. You know what he hasn't done? He hasn't talked about what he's going to do to fix it. His great plan that he supposedly has about replacing Affordable Care Act with absolutely nothing. Go fish. That's his answer. And you know, it's the war affords him not to talk about it, as long as it also affords people not to talk about Epstein, but um, it affords him not to talk about anything to help the American people. And that's what Iraq did for Bush. They didn't have to talk about fixing America or helping Americans. They just, the war, the war, the war. You know, the TV says, the war in Iran. Well, when Bush was president, they said the war in Iraq. And same circus, different monkey. So, you know, it's just, when are you going to grow up? When are you going to stop letting these people control your lives? When are you going to stop taking orders from people that care absolutely nothing about you? And they prove they care nothing about you when they make you go to the hospital and have no way of paying for it. When they make hospital systems run on a shoestring budget because they're not getting support from their government to run and operate effectively and affordably. You know, nurses are picketing in the streets, going on strike because they can't get a fair paycheck. You know, it's very hard to be a nurse. You have to go through many years of school. Uh, your um, level of, well, exposure to trouble, if you make a mistake, is extremely high. Uh, your career could be ended by a little mistake. You could lose your license. Um, I don't think nurses really realize that because they have a license doesn't mean anything. In the sense that you can have your license, but more importantly, you need to qualify for malpractice insurance. Every nurse has malpractice insurance. Whether the hospital pays for it or they pay for it themselves, they all have it. And if you don't qualify for malpractice insurance, you can't work as a nurse. So, and if you have black marks on your record, you know, just like a driving, if you have a DWI, you don't qualify for malpractice insurance. And I wouldn't be surprised if a DWI affected your malpractice insurance, because they look at everything, you know. They don't want a drunk administering medication, you know. So I'm just saying, you might have your license. Your license might be intact, but you can't get malpractice insurance, which means you can't work as a nurse. So, even in a doctor's office. So, it doesn't matter. You're out of business. And you have huge student loans that you now have to work at McDonald's to pay. So, good luck with that. But, you know, and a lot of these mistakes these nurses make are because they're under extreme pressure, working extreme hours, getting no rest. They get a half hour lunch and they have to swallow it down. So, you know, how can you do all that to people and then blame them for when they make a mistake? Sure, nobody wants them to make a mistake, but you set them up for it. You chum the waters and then complain the sharks come. I don't know how you do that, you know? And that's what canceling Obamacare does. It creates a lot of stress, unneeded stress. Uh, It doesn't solve any problems. And like I said, MAGA people are cheap. That's why he canceled Obamacare. MAGA people are cheap. The deep state is cheap. They don't want to spend a dime on anybody. You know, if you get a $20 Tylenol from the hospital, they want you to work at least 2 hours worth of work to pay for that Tylenol. They don't want some insurance company to pay for it for you. They don't care about you. You are a zero-sum game to them. They don't get anything by helping you. See, their attitude is if you're not miserable, they're not powerful. Miserable people are easy to control. It's like uneducated people are easy to control. And what have they done lately? Attack education. And if you look at these people that are in the deep state, uh, their kids don't go to public school. Their kids, you know, if you go to Harvard, it's not a sign of anything, then you're a puppet. You're a high-class puppet, or you're a puppet. You know, the billionaires, their kids don't go to Harvard. They go to a special school you never heard of. They don't want you to know about it. And you can't get in. Your kids can't get in their school. Um, they don't learn in your traditional classroom way. I mean, I'm sure they go to classrooms. But they take a trip to Italy for a class. You know, they're learning how to run the world. They're learning how to manipulate the world. They're not learning how to be a robot for IBM, which is what Harvard teaches you. Harvard raises robots. The deep state, they raise people to be deep state people. And the two are not the same. See, the devil's trying to shut down my throat. And you're never going to hear about those schools. You know, they might, and now with the internet, you might hear, like me, illuminating towards it from the Illuminatis, you know, the people that are on the Illuminatis are in these schools, you know, and they're learning how to pull strings and, you know, people from China and Japan and all the Arab states, you know, all the really, really rich people, they don't go to Harvard. They go to special schools. And even Trump didn't go to those schools because he was, you know, Trump's father, he was nobody in the scheme of things. And, you know, and he wanted to be somebody. And Trump wants to be somebody too. And even Trump's kids didn't go to those schools because Trump is nobody. And the people that go to these schools are publicly nobody. You won't hear their names. They won't be in the press. They won't be on the People magazine and all that. But they're controlling people like Trump. They're in charge of people like Trump and the Prince of Saudi Arabia and the leader of Japan. They're in charge of these people. That's why you don't hear them, because they want the leader of Japan. They want the Prince of Saudi Arabia. They want the Trumps to be in the People magazine, you know, because they're manipulating. It's all part of the manipulation throughout the world. It's not just the United States. It's the world, you know. Putin's kids, they don't go to Harvard, you know. So, all these Ivy League, it's all crap. It's all, you know, there's a lot of rich people. There are a lot of millionaires in this country and in the world. And they need some place for their kids to go, you know, and that's Princeton, that's Yale, that's Harvard, Dartmouth, whatever. But it's all crap. They're not in charge of anything, you know. So they might be in charge of you, you know, they might be your boss or your boss's boss. The ones that I'm talking about are in charge of countries, in charge of who gets the nukes and who does the manipulation and who gets the money, who runs Vietnam. Vietnam is a sweatshop. It's a sweatshop. All the kids in Vietnam create your Louis Vuitton bags and everything like that. And all your clothes comes from Vietnam. You know. And parents there have kids just so they can have workers. you know. And because the parents can't get a job, but the kids can. So they have to have kids to keep the workers, to keep the money coming. But it's a sweatshop. In Indonesia, sweatshop. They're a sweatshop. And they get paid very, very, very little. And you pay extremely large amounts for that Louis Vuitton bag. And most of it goes to the mob, and the mob runs all that stuff. And the mob is the Illuminati in the deep state. It's all connected. They don't operate in a bubble. And the mob keeps the sweatshops running, controls all that, like they do the drugs and the gambling and all that. And those are big things in those countries. Vietnam has a drug problem, just like, why do you think all the soldiers came back from Vietnam and they were all drug addicts? Why? Because they were in Vietnam, they were doing drugs. And it's all interconnected. It's all a spider web. And you pull one piece of the spider web and the whole spider web reacts. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to pull a piece of the web. And, they call it the World Wide Web. Why do they call it the World Wide Web? Or the Internet. It's a net. It's got you. You're on the net. You're in the net. And you're part of the World Wide Web, And the web has got us all. The web's got everybody. If you got a phone, you're part of the web. And what's on the web? Websites. So if you go to Facebook, you're on a website. So configure it that way, right? It's just, that's what it is. You're on. The wording is not by accident. And it's done on purpose. And it's just subtle, under the radar manipulation. It's just like the spider. He sits there and doesn't move. He lets the web do all the work for him. He has to build the web, which they did. Just sit there. The flies are going to come. The bugs are going to come. Just have to sit and wait. And when they do, what does the spider do? Pounces and wraps them up in the web and kills them. And that's what they do to you. When you go to a website, you're caught. You're trapped. You're on Facebook. Can you get off Facebook? Can you just say, I'm not going to use Facebook anymore? Good luck with that. I'm not going to use YouTube anymore. Good luck with that. You're in the web. Your mind. It's not outside. It's your mind. They got your mind. They got you right where they want you. And this digital currency thing. Now, the billionaires, from what I'm reading and hearing, they're saying that digital currency will free you. Yeah, it's funny. They'll free you. It'll make you more free. It'll make you less controlled because it's untraceable, which don't believe it's not traceable. Because the one currency that's going to take over will be traceable, just like your currency now is traceable. Everything will be traceable. The government wouldn't allow it. See, there it goes, the devil again. The government wouldn't allow it if it was untraceable. So the problem is, if you see like what they're doing in China, a lot of young people in China are basically homeless and pathetically poor because their currency is digital And the government said, well, you do these things and we don't like it, so we're cutting off your money. You know, you can't buy food, you can't pay rent, forget gas and car. You can't do anything because you got no money. We cut you off. We deleted your code and go fish. You know, and that's what they're doing to their young people. Um, it's manipulation by the millionaires and billionaires trying to get you to approve crypto. They're trying to say you'll be freer if you approve crypto, and you won't be. Who do you think is going to benefit the most from crypto? Billionaires. Why do you think billionaires are trying to push you to approve it? To make it the top currency, which is what Trump is trying to do, because Trump is in bed with crypto. He has his own crypto. And the US dollar gets in the way. The US dollar is the enemy to crypto. So they're trying to get rid of crypto. And how do they do that? They up the oil prices. They get rid of Medicare, Medicaid. They make it more expensive, which lowers the value of the dollar, which makes you less attracted to it. You know, and it's all a scam. It's all a scam to get you to approve. When they say, "Oh, we're going crypto," everybody's going to go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, great, great, great." Not great. It's going to be the death of society, and the death of this country, because you lose control. You know, if you can only pay at the register with your Apple Watch, you know, which I do. I have an Apple Watch and I pay with my Apple Watch. I do. But if you can only do it that way, one of them, the Apple Watch, don't work. Uh, it's hard to go from Apple Watch to Apple Watch. So someone can't give you money if you don't have money. You know, I mean, I guess you could deposit money into your bank account and all those kinds of things. But if you're in a crypto, they can block you from doing that or block your ability to do that, which basically puts you in the corner, paints you in a corner that you're screwed. You can't get out of because now you can't pay for anything. Uh, and with crypto, they can say, well, you can buy this, but you can't buy that. You know, limit what you can buy with crypto. Because you know, like say if you sell something that they don't approve, you won't have a crypto account. You can't get a crypto account, so you can't accept crypto. So that means if you sell drugs, you can't get a crypto account. Um, you, you don't have a license to sell drugs, you can't get a crypto account. And all these other things, and it's just they can control everything you do. When you pay your rent, you're going to have to pay with a crypto account, and the landlord, the old lady that rents her basement, is going to have to report that on her taxes and pay taxes on her rent that she collects. That now she collects cash and doesn't pay rent, pay taxes, and so your rent's going to go up because she's going to cover those taxes by increasing your rent. So everybody's rent's going up. You know, things like that. Uh, you know, they if you get approved for food stamps or welfare in some way, if that even exists, you know, they'll put it on your crypto. And if you're not approved, you don't eat. And you have to follow the guidelines of the welfare to get approved. So maybe you got to pass a piss test. Maybe you have to not make so much money or live in certain places or be a certain color. You know, so I mean, and they're going to want to go private. Like they want to privatize Social Security, which is a big deal. They want to privatize Social Security in the biggest way because the bankers J.P. Morgans want to privatize Social Security because then they would be in charge of Social Security. But they wouldn't be in charge when it collapses and there's no more money. That's your fault, not theirs. That's your fault. They're running it. They're in charge of what everything happens, but it's your fault when it collapses, and it's their fault when it goes up. And that's how that works. You know. But they want to privatize crypto, which it kind of is now. But they want to keep it privatized. They don't want the government to take it. And I have to say, like the Fed is supposed to be privatized. The Fed is the Federal Reserve is not a government organization in a sense. It is. I mean, it's a quasi world. It's one foot in both worlds. You know, because they have a Fed in Manhattan, which is basically in bed with the markets. You know, and that's why it's there. So, you know, in the government, the president meets with the Fed chairman and all that stuff. But it was set up to be private. J.P. Morgan set up the Fed, and he wanted it to be private. And he got it. Look, we live in a very free country. We used to live in a very free country. And being that it was free, it wasn't well protected. It wasn't well guarded. Just like your schools didn't have armed guards many years ago, and now they all do. So a lot of your organizations, a lot of your institutions didn't have armed guards. They didn't have people watching out, watching the purse strings, watching who was manipulating, who was controlling things. You know, within a free society, we open the door for criminals, for people that are evil, for narcissists, for psychopaths, like a J.P. Morgan, to come in and control and manipulate all the systems and hold all the strings like a puppet master holds all the strings. And that's what we've opened the door to. And Trump is just, he's a puppet trying to act like a puppet master. But that's all part of the play that the puppet show is putting on. Trump is nothing more than a puppet acting like a puppet master. The real puppet master, you'll never see. He's in black. You know, you go to a puppet show, the guy that the puppet master wears all black so you can't see him. That's the deep state. That's the one you don't see. That's who's running the show. And we've allowed this to happen. I say from day one, George Washington allowed it to happen. It wasn't as prevalent because electronics wasn't there. Certain things didn't exist that now exist. And it's been growing. But it's growing exponentially. It's growing extremely fast. You know, like interest, compound interest. It's a scam on society. You know, the biggest thing the Germans did is outlawed interest because the Jews were taking over the country with interest, and that's what they're doing in this country. And what is now? What is high now? Interest rates. Interest rates are high. Trump's in charge. The interest rates are high. So, you know, we don't live in a bubble. You better wake up.